Because I'm here as an old friend of Charlie Capps. We go way back. We go back over 60 years. So I feel like I know him pretty well. I think all of us know basically what his accomplishments have been in recent years. I think I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened as we grew up together that indicated or were indicative of the type of man he would later become. We first met when we were going to summer camp, 10 or 11 years old, back in 1936. Charlie went to camp. He participated in all the activities. He was very active in sports of every sort, particularly swimming, I remember, and tennis. I think he won almost every competition that he participated in. He may not have participated in all of them, but what he participated in, he was good at. And he also, for the 3 years that I knew of that he went to camp, he was the best all-around camper, and he was chosen at that for each one of those 3 years, which I think speaks highly for him, particularly with his peers. And the thing I noticed the most was that even though he beat other people in competition, even though he was chosen over them for that high honor of best all-around camper, there never was any apparent jealousy. And that was because they all liked him so well. He was their friend and my friend. One of the things that Charlie, I know, is proud of, very proud of, I know that it was in the resume of the things that he had accomplished, was the fact that he went into the Army in 1943, 42, when he was 18, in any event, as a bug private. He did so well in his basic training that he was chosen to be a member of the cadre, the training group for the recruits coming in behind him. And he did so well at that, he was chosen for OCS, went on to receive a commission as a second lieutenant, and was discharged as a first lieutenant from the United States Army after service overseas in the Philippines. Now, a lot of you remember that time and know that going in as a bug private and making it to first lieutenant was a pretty hard job. So he's to be praised for that and remembered for it. I'm not sure how many people knew that. I frankly had not thought about it in a long time until I read it in the paper. But I think it's something worthwhile. He later came back to the United States after he was discharged from the Army, attended school at Ole Miss, received his degree. While he was there, he was president of his fraternity, a well-known leader on the campus, and well-liked, universally liked, by everybody that I knew anything about. After he finished Ole Miss, he came back to Cleveland and began his career. And in 1949, I believe it was, he married the lovely Ellen Hobbs from Greenwood. Now that's not the least of his accomplishments. And I'm happy to say that there's 3 children, Linda, Margaret, and Charles III, and their families are here in the audience today with Charlie and Allie. Charlie, in 1963, was elected as sheriff of Bolivar County. And he took that job seriously. He did the job like it should be done. At that time, the office of sheriff and tax collector had not been separated, and sheriffs could not succeed themselves. And most of the people, I won't say most of them, but at least a lot of the people who was elected sheriff would appoint a chief deputy as law enforcement, and a chief deputy for tax collections, and they would perform that task, and the sheriff himself would be sort of a figurehead presider over their affairs. Charlie didn't feel that way about it. He, of course, had excellent people to help him. But when the time came to go out on a manhunt or something that involved the danger of the people that worked for him, he went with them. He took an active part in that because he thought that was right. If he was going to be sheriff, he needed to be sheriff, and he was. Of course, he's contributed so much to this community. You know, of course, you're all aware of this, but he worked with the Chamber of Commerce. He worked with the Delta Council. He was president of the Delta Council, in effect, Chamber of Commerce for the Delta area. He's been very, very active in his church, a leader in his church. And a man who contributes that much to his community alone has done something worthwhile. His legislative career, and throughout that legislative career, Charlie has championed the cause for better education at all levels. The institutions of higher learning have all benefited by his decisive leadership and wisdom. And Delta State, in its turn, was one of the recipients of that ability of Charlie's to make those decisions and to be decisive about what was right and what was wrong. As Lieutenant Governor or Governor Musgrove mentioned, buildings are named for people. And for the most part, they're named for people who've made a real contribution in one way or the other. I couldn't tell you all of the different capacities that the people on this campus or that the buildings have been named for. I know some of them, but I don't know them all, so I won't mention any of them, except this one. And it's for the people who've championed and furthered the growth, the development, and the success of Delta State University and higher education throughout this entire state, and for that matter, outside of this state. The dedication of this building in Charlie Capps' name is in recognition of his contributions to this great institution and all education, his personal character, integrity, ability, and his life of service to his home, county, area, state, and to his country. This building is a lasting monument to a life well spent and guarantees that the name of Charles Wilson Capps, Jr. will stand forever with the names of the greatest benefactors of this wonderful institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Pearson, for those remarks. When Mr. Capps was asked who he would like to have to deliver the dedicatory address, he didn't hesitate for a minute. He named our keynote speaker, the Honorable Tim Ford. Speaker Ford, a resident of Tupelo, is serving his 5th term in the Mississippi House of Representatives and his 3rd term as the Speaker of the House. Throughout his legislative career, he has been a strong supporter of economic development, agriculture, open meetings, and education at all levels. His status on the national level is evidenced by his election as president of the National Speakers Conference and his service as a director of the State Legislative Leaders Foundation, a national association of presiding officers. It is a pleasure to present the Speaker of the House of Mississippi Representatives, the Honorable Tim Ford.
Thank you, Bob. It is a real pleasure to be here on the campus of Delta State today in Cleveland, Mississippi. It's a fun time to visit the campus, and especially because we're here to help recognize one of our own, Representative Charles W. Capps, Jr. Besides being my valued counsel on so many matters, he is also my personal friend. Charlie, there's been some comments among some of our fellow members who say that it is very appropriate to name a building, an archives building, a museum, a building for old stuff after you. I'll tell you who those members are in January.
I already know.
The folks here at Delta State are getting Mrs. Capps to tell Charlie that this will be a smoke-free facility. Some of my fellow House members don't know that Mrs. Capps won't let Charlie smoke in his own house, yet we still have to put up with that cigar down in the Capitol. It's an exciting time now to be involved in higher education in the state of Mississippi because a lot is going on. The legislature has worked hard in recent years to restore and enhance higher education funding since the gloom days of the late 1980s and the early 1990s. The institutions of higher learning now have greater respect in the halls of the Capitol, more so than any time I can remember in recent history. Hard work on behalf of our state universities from your presidents, members of the College Board, dedicated legislators, and others have increased funding for salaries and programs and building projects such as the one that we're here today dedicating. A multi-year salary increase for university faculty and teachers is underway. This is the first time such a commitment has been made by your legislature. State finance bonding for capital improvements for new buildings as well as repair and renovation monies have been forthcoming, and it is now at an all-time high. The beauty of this campus here at Delta State signifies that funding has been successful and shows that the state's tax dollars have been well spent. Those of you that are here today in the teaching arena deserve much praise for your dedication to such a worthy cause, and we in the legislature applaud you for your hard work. One of the people most responsible for these new and improved education efforts is the man that we are here today to honor. Charlie W. Capps, Jr. has represented the people of Bolivar and surrounding counties in the Mississippi House of Representatives very ably for 26 years. He has served as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee for 10 of those 26 years. For those of you who are not familiar with the workings of the legislature, that's big. That's real big. And it's real important to our state, and it's real important to this area. If it deals with state money, Chairman Capps and his Appropriation Committee and his counterparts in the Senate is where it happens. He and his committee handle the $3.1 billion in general fund revenues that go through your state capital. And that's why I and so many of his colleagues are here today to attend this dedication of the Charles W. Capps, Jr. Archives and Museum Building. We know the good work that Charlie has done and how deserving he is of this honor. To give you an example of what Mr. Capps has done for higher education alone, listen to these numbers. In the years that he has served as chairman of the Appropriations Committee since 1988, the General Fund appropriation and the Educational Enhancement Fund monies to our 8 state universities has grown from approximately $187 million to over $278 million. That's an increase of some $91.8 million, 49.1%, almost 50% growth in a 10-year period. And IHL funding is slated for another nice increase this coming year. Mr. Capps has been supportive of education at all levels. He was the lead supporter for the School for Math and Science that was established at Mississippi University for Women. This program has had phenomenal success and is very popular with some of our brightest young minds in our state. Mr. Capps was asked to give the first commencement address back a decade or so ago, and I remember it because I was there. And this message to them was, 1, to get a good education, 2, to stay in our state and attend one of our outstanding universities that this state has to offer, and 3, when they got there, when they graduated, to stay in our state and work and help other Mississippians. Well, that speech impressed me. Mr. Capps did not like us exporting our talents to other areas of the country, and he knew that we needed their help for our state to prosper. And the numbers show that we have prospered. Your state is in the best fiscal shape that it's ever been in, largely because of the hard work of that one man, Mr. Charlie Capps. I know because I was there. Many people, many politicians, and would-be politicians have tried to take the credit for our state's fiscal prosperity, but they weren't responsible. I've seen the work in the trenches, the late-night work of hashing budgets out, the give and take that go on to reach budget agreements. All of this goes on in Mr. Capps' office. He began the policy in the Appropriations Committee of producing a balanced budget recommendation to present to the full House. What that means is we don't bust the budget. He was instrumental in establishing the Working Cash Stabilization Reserve Fund, our rainy day fund, to ensure that we have reserves in case the economy sours. Today, our reserve fund is second in the nation. It has some $212 million today, the largest amount percentage-wise of any in the nation. Under Mr. Capps' watch, the 98% spending limit was instituted. Well, what does that mean? It means that we in the legislature can only spend up to 98% of available tax dollars. The other 2% goes into that rainy day fund I was just mentioning. This spending limit has been a godsend to us and has been the envy of many other states that marvel at how well the budget system in our state works. We have been requested by numerous states for help in their budgeting process. The state of Arkansas 2 years ago sent 8 folks over to observe our process. The state of Mississippi is in great fiscal shape, largely to the unsung work of Charlie Capps. And while Charlie Capps' major work has been in fiscal affairs and in education, he occasionally strays into other work going on in and around our state. Seeing Jack Cow here today reminds me of how instrumental Mr. Capps was, to say the least, after 3 debates on the House floor, in bringing the palaces of St. Petersburg and the splendors of Versailles to Mississippi. These 2 exhibits have reached national and international acclaim for our state. Locally, Mr. Capps is working diligently to help bring an Advanced Technology Center to the Delta. He's very involved in efforts to improve the quality of life in the Delta. Just last week, he brought a group of school superintendents from the Delta to our Legislative Budget Committee to address concerns and propose solutions to the teacher shortage here in the Delta. So yes, I believe that it is totally appropriate to honor Charles W. Capps, Jr. by naming a building here on Delta State's campus for him. This building is beautiful. It stands as a reminder of the life and activity that will go in it over the years. The students, the faculty, and the citizens who utilize this building have a fine structure to work in. Its sturdiness will ensure its use for many years to come, and it will house those things that we need to remember. The building will house many historical documents and papers, including those of Representative Charles W. Capps, Jr. the building will signify the lasting legacy of a great American, a statesman, a Southern gentleman, and a close friend. To Miss Allen Capps, the lovely and dedicated wife of Charlie, and to his children, Alinda, Margaret, and Charlie, and the grandchildren and the other family members, we say thank you. On behalf of the members of the Mississippi House of Representatives and of the state of Mississippi, we say thank you for sharing Charlie with us. We know he's put in long hours away from home at your expense, but the state is better for it. To the students, the faculty, and administration of Delta State University, Dr. White, we thank you for sending Mr. Capps to Jackson to represent you, and thank you today for honoring one of our own in this manner. To the members of the State College Board, the Board of Institutions of Higher Learning, we thank you for approving the name of this building, the Charles W. Capps, Jr. Archives and Museum Building. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, it is now my pleasure to officially name this grand facility that you see behind me, the Charles W. Capps Archives and Museum, and now to present at this time the Honorable Charles W. Capps to make any comments he might like to make. Mr. Capps. Thank you, Speaker Ford, Governor Musgrove, Judge Pearson, President White, Reverend Pace, and particularly my colleagues in the House and in the Senate. Many of you have driven long miles to be with us today.